The lights of The Tonight Show glimmered as the audience settled in, their buzz a low hum beneath the familiar jingle of the house band. Jimmy Fallon strode out, all grins and easy charm, waving to the crowd like a man who'd never known a bad night. It was March 22nd, 2025, and the guest lineup promised a jolt of electricity. Elon Musk, the tech titan, whose every word seemed to split the world in two. The crowd roared as Musk took the stage, his lanky frame folding into the guest chair, a half-smirk playing on his lips. What could go wrong? A billionaire visionary, a late-night king, two giants of their realms, sharing a couch for laughs and light banter. Or so everyone thought. But beneath the surface, something simmered. Jimmy, ever the crowd-pleaser, opened with his usual playbook. A quip about Tesla's latest self-driving snafu, a nod to SpaceX's rocket that didn't quite stick the landing. The audience lapped it up, their laughter a warm blanket over the room. Musk nodded along, his eyes sharp, taking it in stride. Was this just another night of playful jabs? Or was Jimmy testing the waters, prodding a man known for his thin skin and iron will? The first few minutes ticked by smoothly, a dance of wit and deflection, but the air held a charge, like static before a storm. Then came the pivot. Jimmy leaned in, his tone shifting from jovial to pointed, and brought up the elephant in the room. Musk's vocal support for Donald Trump. The crowd hushed, sensing the turn. Why had Musk doubled down on a figure so divisive, even as the 2024 election dust still lingered? Was it principle, provocation, or just another chess move from a man who thrived on chaos? Jimmy didn't ask outright, not yet. Instead, he tossed out a softball wrapped in barbed wire, a comment about Trump's latest rally, paired with a raised eyebrow aimed at Musk. The billionaire's smirk tightened, his fingers drumming the armrest. The audience leaned forward. What did Musk see in Trump that others didn't? And why did Jimmy, king of the safe laugh, seem so eager to poke that bear? The conversation veered into politics, a minefield neither man could sidestep. Musk launched into a defense, his voice steady but edged, painting Trump as a disruptor, a necessary jolt to a broken system. Jimmy countered, his grin fading, pressing Musk on the messier parts of Trump's legacy. Division, bombast, the kind of chaos that didn't come with a blueprint. The crowd split, some cheering Musk's boldness, others murmuring at Jimmy's. Pushback. It wasn't a shouting match, not yet, but the temperature climbed. Musk's jaw tightened as Jimmy kept digging, his questions sharper now, less playful. Was this still a talk show or a courtroom? And how long could Musk sit there, pinned under the spotlight, before something snapped? By the segment's end, the tension hung thick. Jimmy cracked a joke to lighten the mood, but it landed flat, the audience too caught up in the brewing clash. Musk's eyes flicked to the side, like a man plotting an exit or a counterstrike. The stage was set, the fuse lit. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be polite. The Tonight Show studio felt smaller now, the air between Jimmy Fallon and Elon Musk crackling with something raw. The audience, once a sea of easy laughter, sat on edge, their murmurs a low rumble as the conversation plunged deeper into the political fray. Jimmy, sensing the shift, shed the last of his late-night host veneer. His questions grew bolder, his tone less cushioned, as he zeroed in on Musk's unwavering defense of Trump. The billionaire, for his part, leaned forward, his posture rigid. Like a man bracing for impact or ready to throw a punch, Jimmy pressed harder, bringing up Trump's recent comments on tariffs, the kind of policy Musk had publicly cheered. He painted a picture of economic fallout, jobs lost, prices spiking. His words aimed not just at Musk but at the crowd, tugging at their doubts. Musk fired back, his voice cutting through the noise, arguing that disruption was the point. Short-term, pain for long-term gain, a system reset only a figure like Trump could pull off. The audience split again, some nodding at Musk's logic, others shifting uncomfortably as Jimmy tilted his head, skepticism etched across his face. Then came the first real spark. Jimmy, with a half-laugh that didn't reach his eyes, asked if Musk's support was less about principle and more about tax breaks for billionaires like him. The jab landed, sharp and personal, and the crowd gasped, a mix of shock and delight rippling through them. Musk's expression darkened, his fingers curling into the armrest. He didn't shout, not yet, but his response carried a bite, calling out Jimmy for oversimplifying a world the host couldn't grasp, a dig at the cushy bubble of late-night TV. The room pulsed with unease, the line between debate and duel blurring. Fast Jimmy didn't back down. He leaned closer, his voice steady, and brought up Trump's legal battles, the scandals that clung to him like shadows. He asked Musk how a man so tied to innovation could back someone mired in the past, someone who thrived on division rather than progress. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down in front of millions. Musk's eyes narrowed, his reply laced with steel. Trump's flaws were noise, he said. The real signal was a vision most couldn't see. But the crowd sensed the strain in his words, the way his cool was fraying at the edges. The exchange escalated, each man digging in, their voices overlapping as civility slipped. Jimmy's charm turned weaponized, his jabs cloaked as humor but landing like accusations. Musk, usually unflappable, grew terse, his answers shorter, his patience visibly thinning. The audience fed off it, their reactions louder, more polarized, cheers clashing with boos, a storm brewing in the seats. By the end of the segment, the stage felt like a pressure cooker, the lid rattling, ready to blow. Musk shifted in his chair, his gaze darting to the wings while Jimmy sat back, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. The night was far from over, and the breaking point loomed close. The Tonight Show stage vibrated with a restless energy, the audience caught in the crossfire of Jimmy Fallon's relentless probing and Elon Musk's tightening grip on his composure. The lights seemed harsher now, casting long shadows as the two men faced off, their exchange no longer a dance but a collision. Jimmy, emboldened by the crowd's split reactions, doubled down, his questions slicing deeper into Musk's resolve. The billionaire, once a master of deflection, found himself cornered, his usual swagger buckling under the weight of the host's calculated assault. Jimmy pivoted to a new angle, his voice dripping with a mix of curiosity and accusation. He brought up Musk's tweets, those late-night dispatches where he'd championed Trump as a battering ram against the establishment. The host read between the lines, suggesting Musk's support wasn't vision but ego, a tech mogul hitching his star to a political wildcard for clout. The crowd stirred, some chuckling nervously, others leaning in, hooked on the audacity. Musk's face hardened, his lips pressing into a thin line as he shot back, dismissing Jimmy's take as shallow, a cheap shot from someone who'd never built anything real. The words stung, and the room felt the impact. But Jimmy wasn't done. He leaned into the personal, asking how Musk squared his talk of humanity's future, Mars colonies, clean energy, with backing a man whose rhetoric often fueled anger over unity. The question hung heavy, a spotlight on Musk's contradictions, and the audience held its breath. Musk countered, his tone icy, arguing that progress demanded tough choices, leaders who'd break molds, not polish them. Yet his voice betrayed a flicker of strain, a crack in the armor as Jimmy kept pushing, relentless, like a boxer sensing a faltering opponent. The host seized the moment, his next move a gut punch. He brought up Tesla workers, the ones Musk claimed, to champion, and painted a grim picture, layoffs looming if Trump's policies tanked the economy. It was a masterstroke, tying Musk's empire to the stakes, and the crowd erupted, some jeering, others murmuring in uneasy agreement. Musk's eyes flashed, his hands clenching, and he snapped back, accusing Jimmy of twisting reality for applause, a puppet of the room's loudest voices. The insult landed, but it couldn't mask the tremor in his stance. He was rattled, and everyone saw it. The segment spiraled, the air thick with hostility. Jimmy's jabs grew sharper, his humor a thin veil over outright disdain, while Musk's responses turned clipped, defensive, his cool unraveling thread by thread. The audience fed the chaos, their cheers and boos a rising tide, drowning out any chance of retreat. By the end, Musk sat rigid, his gaze locked on Jimmy, who met it with a glint of victory. The breaking point was close, a hairline fracture ready to split wide open. The next move would decide it all. The Tonight Show studio pulsed with a raw electric charge, the audience a live wire feeding off the unraveling spectacle. Jimmy Fallon, his confidence surging, sat forward, eyes locked on Elon Musk, who perched on the edge of his chair like a coiled spring. The banter was gone, replaced by a duel of wills, each man's words a blade aimed at the other's core. The crowd, split and restless, amplified the tension, their reactions a roar that drowned out the house band's futile attempts to smooth the edges. Jimmy struck first, his tone cutting, no longer cloaked in jest. He zeroed in on Musk's wealth, painting him as a man so far removed from the average worker that his Trump support reeked of privilege, not principle. He twisted the knife, suggesting Musk's vision of the future was a playground for the elite, leaving everyone else to scrape by in the wreckage of his politics. The audience erupted, some cheering the takedown, others hissing at the low blow. Musk's face flushed, a rare crack in his steel facade, and he fired back, his voice low but venomous, calling Jimmy a hypocrite, a millionaire comedian preaching from a gilded stage. The room shook with the weight of it, a personal line crossed. The host didn't flinch. He leaned closer, his next salvo a public shaming dressed as a question. How could Musk, a father, back a figure whose chaos might burden the next generation? It was a gut shot, dragging Musk's kids into the fray, and the crowd gasped, sensing the boundary breached. Musk's eyes widened, then narrowed, his hands balling into fists. He countered, his words sharp, accusing Jimmy of cheap theatrics, exploiting family for ratings. But the strain in his voice betrayed him. He was wounded, and the audience felt it, their noise swelling into a chaotic chorus. Jimmy pressed his advantage, his rhythm unrelenting. He mocked Musk's Twitter rants, calling them the tantrums of a man who couldn't handle dissent, a billionaire crying victim while the world burned. The crowd roared, some reveling in the humiliation, others shifting uneasily as the attack grew vicious. Musk's restraint snapped, his reply a growl. He labeled Jimmy a coward, hiding behind laughs while he, Musk, took real risks. The insult landed, but it couldn't stem the tide. Jimmy was in control, the room his weapon, and Musk was drowning. The segment hit fever pitch, the clash a full-on blaze. Jimmy's jabs turned relentless, each one a public flogging. Musk's ego, his companies, his choices, all fair game. The billionaire's defenses crumbled, his posture stiff, his eyes darting to the wings as if plotting escape. The audience, whipped into a frenzy, fueled the fire, their cheers and jeers a deafening storm. By the end, Musk sat silent, his jaw clenched, a man pushed past his limit. Jimmy smirked, victorious, oblivious to the volcano he'd stoked. The eruption was seconds away. The Tonight Show stage was a pressure cooker, the air thick with the fallout of Jimmy Fallon's merciless onslaught. Elon Musk sat rigid, his silence a stark contrast to the chaos around him, the audience's roars, the band's nervous strums, the host's smug lean into the desk. Jimmy, riding the wave of the crowd's fervor, had turned the night into his arena, each barb a lash that stripped Musk bare. The billionaire's hands trembled faintly, a telltale sign of the rage boiling beneath his stony exterior. The room didn't know it yet, but the dam was about to burst. Jimmy, emboldened by Musk's stillness, went for the kill. He painted a caricature of the tech mogul as a deluded king, propping up Trump like a prop in his own fantasy, blind to the real world. Wreckage. The crowd ate it up, their laughter sharp, cutting, a collective humiliation that echoed off the walls. Musk's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Jimmy with a glare that could have burned through steel. He didn't speak, not at first. His silence was louder, a gathering storm that silenced the room's edges. The audience faltered, sensing the shift, their noise dipping as anticipation took hold. Then it came. Musk rose to his feet, slow at first, deliberate, his chair scraping the floor with a sound that pierced the tension. Jimmy paused mid-jibe, thrown off by the sudden movement. Musk's voice, when it finally broke, was low, guttural, a controlled fury that sliced through the din. He didn't debate or deflect. He unloaded, calling Jimmy a shallow puppet, a man who'd never understand the weight of real stakes. The words weren't loud, but they carried, each one a hammer strike, and the crowd hushed, caught off guard by the rawness of it. Jimmy scrambled, tossing out a quip to regain footing, but it fell flat, drowned by the gravity of Musk's stand. The billionaire towered over the set, his presence a force, and for a moment he owned the stage, not as a guest but as a man done being prey. Then, without warning, he turned, his long strides eating up the distance to the wings. The audience gasped, some cheering, others stunned, as Jimmy called after him, his voice tinged with panic, trying to claw back control. It was too late. Musk reached the edge of the set, his anger spilling over. His foot lashed out, connecting with a flimsy panel, a piece of the backdrop, all glitter and no substance. It crumpled under the blow, a loud crack splitting the air, and the crowd erupted, a mix of shock and awe. He didn't look back, disappearing into the shadows of the wings, leaving chaos in his wake. Jimmy sat frozen, his smirk gone, the studio a battlefield with no victor in sight. The storm had broken, and the night was shattered. The Tonight Show studio hung in stunned silence, the echo of Elon Musk's kick against the set still reverberating as the lights caught the splintered panel swaying pitifully. Jimmy Fallon sat behind his desk, his hands gripping the edge, his face a mask of disbelief tinged with something darker, regret maybe, or the dawning realization he'd pushed too far. The audience, breathless from the chaos, shifted in their seats, some whispering, others staring at the empty space where Musk had stood moments before. The band struck up a tentative chord, but it felt hollow, a weak attempt to stitch the night back together. Backstage, the mood was a different beast. Crew members darted around, voices hushed but urgent, as if afraid to disturb the ghost of Musk's exit. The billionaire was gone, his long strides carrying him out of the building into the New York night, leaving behind a wake of murmurs and stunned glances. Producers scrambled, barking orders to cut to commercial, to salvage what was left of the broadcast. But the damage was done. The footage of Musk's departure, raw and unscripted, was already burning through the airwaves, destined to flood screens worldwide. On stage, Jimmy tried to recover. He forced a laugh, thin and brittle, and cracked a joke about needing a sturdier set. The crowd responded weakly, their energy spent, torn between the thrill of the clash and the unease of its fallout. He shuffled papers, his usual charm flickering as he pivoted to the next segment, a musical guest, a safe harbor. But his eyes kept darting to the wings, as if expecting Musk to storm back, to rewrite the ending. The truth settled in. The night belonged to the man who'd walked away, not the one left holding the mic. The audience, too, grappled with what they'd witnessed. Some felt a rush, adrenalized by the unfiltered showdown, while others sat uneasy, replaying Jimmy's jabs, Musk's fury. The moment it all broke, whispers spread. Had Jimmy gone too far, turning a talk show into a takedown? Or had Musk, the untouchable titan, shown a crack too human to ignore? The room buzzed with fractured takes, a microcosm of the divide Musk's politics had always stoked. Yet beneath it all lingered a strange respect, a nod to the man who'd chosen to leave rather than bend. As the show limped to its close, the energy shifted. Jimmy wrapped up, his voice steadier but subdued, thanking the crowd with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The lights dimmed, the applause faded, and the studio emptied, leaving behind a story already outgrowing its walls. Musk's exit wasn't just a moment, it was a statement, a spark that would ignite debates long after the cameras stopped rolling. The dust settled, but the echoes promised more. The Tonight Show's final credits rolled, but the real story was just beginning beyond the studio's walls. By morning, Elon Musk's storm-off was everywhere, clips flooding social media, headlines screaming, pundits dissecting every frame. The shattered set panel became an icon, a symbol of a night where the script flipped, and Jimmy Fallon's polished world cracked under the weight of its own provocation. The audience from that electric evening dispersed into the world, carrying tales of the clash, their voices adding fuel to a fire that burned brighter than anyone expected. Jimmy, back in his dressing room as the studio quieted, faced a different reckoning. The playback looped on a monitor, his jabs sharper in hindsight, his triumph hollowed out by Musk's exit. He'd wanted a moment, a viral spark, but the cost glared back at him, a guest humiliated, a line crossed, a stage left in pieces. The host who thrived on laughter found himself the punchline, his control slipping through his fingers as the narrative spun beyond his grasp. The crowd's cheers faded in his memory, replaced by the sound of Musk's footsteps, steady and unyielding, walking away. Musk, meanwhile, emerged into the crisp March night, his breath visible in the city's glow. He didn't linger, didn't tweet, didn't need to. The act spoke louder than any words. His car idled at the curb, a sleek shadow against the chaos he'd left behind, and as he slid inside, a faint smirk returned. He'd taken the hits, absorbed the flames, and chosen his ground. The world would argue his politics, his temper, his worth, but none could deny the power in his stride, the defiance in that final kick. He drove off, not a victim, but a victor who'd rewritten the rules. The aftermath played out in real time. Fans hailed Musk as a rebel, a man who'd faced the gauntlet and walked tall while others saw hubris, a titan too fragile to stay. Jimmy's supporters rallied, praising his nerve, but the louder chorus questioned his venom, his need to tear down rather than lift up. The numbers told the tale. Views soared, not for the host's wit, but for the guests' rebellion. The talk show machine churned on, booking new faces. But that night lingered, a benchmark of what happened when giants clashed and one refused to kneel. In the end, Musk's triumph wasn't in winning the argument, it was in owning the exit. He'd turned Jimmy's stage into his own, a platform not for debate, but for a stand that echoed far beyond the applause. The audience, your viewers included, felt it, the rush of a man reclaiming his narrative, leaving the wreckage as his proof. The story closed, not with a handshake or a fade out, but with a kick that said enough, a finale fierce, complete, and undeniably his.